YouTube vinyl community, Vince Guaraldi Trio fans, random people on the internet, my name is Giggens, and we're here today to talk about A Boy Named Charlie Brown by the Vince Guaraldi Trio. The reason I picked this is because, one, I've always loved the Peanuts cartoons. They were a big part of my childhood, and the music was always so fascinating. And I feel like for a lot of people, this is their gateway drug to jazz, because you don't realize you're kind of listening to jazz while you watch these movies. You just hear like really nice background music. And then when you put the music on just for itself, put the record on just on its own, you realize just how magical the playing is on these songs. And I felt like, you know what, it'd be a fun one to research, and here's why. Because the release history of this thing is absolutely bizarre. So this happens to be a 2021 Target version, came out through Craft Recordings. They call it the baseball card edition. There's a set of 8 baseball cards in here, which is super cool. It mentions having the classics, Linus and Lucy on here, of course. But it's an all-analog mastering from the original stereo tapes by Kevin Gray at Coherent Audio. Kevin Gray's done everything. He's a really good... He masters records really well, is what I'm trying to say. But let me show you the cards. We'll just start there, because they're super cool. So they come, connected, of course. A whole bunch of the Peanuts gang, and then stats. It's really pretty rad. So the history of this album is bizarre, because you would think, alright, A Boy Named Charlie Brown. It must be the soundtrack to the movie. Not quite. So, here's the thing. If you look on Wikipedia or different websites and you type in A Boy Named Charlie Brown, you'll see an album that came out in 1970. In fact, 2 different versions have been out since that movie's release. The very first one that came out was called Selections from the Film Soundtrack, which came out in 1970. And there was also one called the Original Motion Picture Soundtrack from 2017. The first one from 1970 came with a book, so you can follow along with it, and went out of print in the early 70s as well. The one from 2017 was a reissue, of course, but it was a reissue using different music. So both those releases are in fact different, and not this album. So, where does this album come from? It actually comes from this. It comes from Jazz Impressions of A Boy Named Charlie Brown from the Vince Guaraldi Trio from 1964. This is actually the same album as this with different titles. Super confusing. With this album, the story gets even more confusing. So this came out first, meant to be the soundtrack for a documentary called A Boy Named Charlie Brown. It was going to be a TV special that never aired. The album came out instead. Segments from that special were used in a 1969 special called Charlie Brown and Charles Schultz, and in that same year, that's where this movie came out. So that's crazy. In 1972, this got reissued to this. And the original album cover said, the original soundtrack recording of the CBS television special. So that was slightly different. So they used A Boy Named Charlie Brown, this cover, and that tagline. Much later when the CD came out, they had Charlie Brown in a red shirt. And then when this got finally reissued in 2015 on CD, they restored it to the original cover, changed this to say the original soundtrack recording. And when the CD came out, it actually charted. It hit number 20 in the Billboard soundtrack charts in early 2015 for that 2014 CD reissue. So if you're able to follow all of that, holy moly, here we are. Let's talk about the actual music now. It opens up with a classic called Oh Good Grief, a light dancing, key twinkling kind of romper, soft cymbal work, supremely smooth bass. It's a warm, gentle piano romp. It stays in your head. It's one of those songs that, if you've ever watched a Charlie Brown cartoon, you've heard that song before. It's one of those songs that plays as they're like walking around or hanging out by that brick wall with nothing behind them for some reason. The second track, Pebble Beach, really enjoy this one. Nice shuffly stick work on the rim for the drums. Those peppy keys with that super memorable riff. I mean, it's just a really nice riff, good bouncing bass, more of a swing to this one, and that shaker percussion throughout this whole thing gives it a nice little feel, a little bit of a change of pace from just the standard drums. And then Happiness Is follows that, which is definitely more of a nostalgic, slightly sadder track, very soft percussion, minimal bass until it has to pop up, like it fills in some gaps. But Vince really dazzles in spots on the piano on this one. Schroeder is a piano solo, which is really cool, and it kind of reminds me of like an old piano roll from like the early vaudeville days, which is fitting for Peanuts' in-house piano man. Nice little song there. And then side one ends with Charlie Brown theme, which is a very classic song, another shuffle kind of feel. Very characteristic Vince moves here, where he can like pick out single notes, and his phrasing is so articulate, and his timing is purely his own, which gives it that characteristic that blends so well with the Peanuts gang being such an original comic idea, to have that music that just accents it perfectly. So even without the comic like completely out of the picture and just the music, the idea of Vince playing these notes, creating these little fixtures for himself on the piano, really shows off his piano skills. It's definitely a fascinating listen. Side 2 opens up with Linus and Lucy, and what more can be said about that, but it's probably the most well-known jazz song ever. Just for the amount of people that have heard it subconsciously over the years. That infectious piano riff, the brushes on the drums pick up when they need to. It's an instantly classic, memorable riff that you've definitely heard, and it's one of those songs that instantly sounds happy. You just picture Snoopy dancing when you hear this song. It's crazy. Blue Charlie Brown, straight up bluesy jazz on this one. Really grooving bass on this. I love the bass. Really delicate key touches here too. Light cymbal work. They really play with the dynamics on this one, especially near the end. Just a classic Vince & Co. song. Baseball theme is slightly upbeat and slightly faster than the rest of the songs on this album. The drums get to rock a little bit more. A lot more cymbal work on this one as well, but just a comfy, feel-good energy. It's not exactly like charged up energy, but it's like a happy energy. You really feel it. There's lots of optimism on this track. And the last song on this album is Frida with the Naturally Curly Hair. I love the piano refrain on this one, and the occasional bounces that it has almost reminds you of her, like, in the comics, she's always like pushing up her hair, so it's kind of like that don, maybe that's her hair, getting the push up there, but cool bass lines. The drums are very cool in their shuffle rhythm. Just a really fun way to close out the album. Here's the back cover, which is a lot of liner notes on here. Very, very cool to read all about the Peanuts gang there. And let me show you what the record looks like, because it's on green vinyl. So they recreated the fantasy label, but it's on this really nice, almost translucent green vinyl. Super cool. So there you go. The Vince Guaraldi Trio, A Boy Named Charlie Brown, also known as Jazz Impressions of A Boy Named Charlie Brown. A complicated release history for sure. Trying to track down the exact pressings and getting lost in the fact that there are albums called A Boy Named Charlie Brown, but they have nothing to do with this, because this is a reissue of the original album. All these names got fluctuated and pushed around, so it's kind of a screwy thing to get your head around, but it was really fun to do the research on this one. So if you're watching this, I hope it helped out with some of your research as well. But there you go. This happens to be a Target exclusive. I'm sure it's available through other websites as well. I just happened to see it at Target last year and picked it up. It sounds phenomenal. Absolute crystal clarity. The bass is prominent. The drums are nice and shuffly and punchy. The piano is super tinkly. I mean, everything about this thing is just, it sparkles. A really great jazz album. So, I mean, if you're looking to get into jazz and you don't know where to start, you really can't go wrong with Vince Guaraldi, because he makes really happy, digestible jazz. And jazz can be a daunting genre to get into, especially with some of the greats out there, and some of the stuff some people just what am I listening to? This is really, really, really good gateway jazz. It's fantastic stuff. So for me, 9 out of 10. You know what? 10 out of 10, because of the history behind this thing. The release history is so freaking weird. So there you go. Good grief. Anyways, my name is Giggens. This has been Vince Guaraldi Trio, A Boy Named Charlie Brown. Pick it up in a store near you. I highly recommend this thing. And that's it. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you guys in the next video. Take care of yourselves. Bye-bye.